Hello there. It's Most Things Kenobi. This is the podcast you're looking for.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Most Things Kenobi, a podcast about Obi-Wan Kenobi and all things Star Wars. I'm your host, Leanne.
And I'm your host, Lauren.
And this week, oh, yes, we are entering the Citadel.
More Clone Wars. I am so happy.
Yes. And this arc, okay, so we're going to do it in usual fashion. We'll start with the first episode in the arc. Next week, we'll do the following episode, and then we'll wrap it up week after that. So,
yes.
Today's episode is titled The Citadel. Mm-hmm. And it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier with each one of these episodes, as they often do in the Clone Wars with a big arc.
Not an uncommon phenomenon there at all.
So not only that, but this Citadel arc follows the Mortis arc. So all of that just forget about it. It was all a dream.
Right. It was Wizard of Oz.
It just thrust into this now. I love this arc. I love it very much.
It's really, really good. It's really good. It's really smart. And there's some crazy that happens that I just really didn't expect to see. Kid show, not a kid show.
Totally. And big moments happen. Big, revealing things happen in this arc. Things that matter way later in the timeline.
Yes.
What the is the Citadel? Did you find anything about the Citadel? Because we were going to research.
Yeah.
It was built for Jedi, rogue Jedi.
Yeah, when it was built a long time ago. It was built 500 years ago from when the story takes place. And it was built by the Galactic Republic with the help of the Jedi for any Jedi who turned dark or turned against the Order. To me, that's just crazy that they
that's so insane.
They go with maximum security prison rather than any kind of rehabilitation or anything.
I don't know, deal with the problem instead of just trying to contain it. It's
right.
It's f***ed up that the Jedi helped with this. What rogue Jedi did they have that they said, you know what, we're going to need to build a prison?
Right. It's pretty crazy, honestly. And it's built on, I'm probably not going to say this correctly, Lola Sayu. That's the name of the planet.
Yes.
And there was some catastrophic event that took place that no one was sure what happened. But it exposed the molten core of the planet. And the planet is slowly disintegrating and breaking apart and going into orbit around itself. And they decided to build on this planet, knowing it was like this already.
I just find this extremely fascinating. And horrifying.
It's super interesting. Yeah, and it's in its horrificness, it's interesting. So, they did this on purpose because it was a very dangerous place to be. So, if anyone escaped, what we talked about in Kadavo, if you escape, you're not in a very hospitable place. Food and, vegetation didn't grow. They had everything shipped in, basically, to survive on the Citadel. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And it was mostly droids that lived and worked there, if you lived, in a sense. But, there's a reason why, because anything living had to remain inside the Citadel.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anything outside wasn't going to make it. I mean, you see how the Jedi that are in on this and the clones struggle the entire time they're outside the Citadel. Mm-hmm. I mean, they struggle when they're inside the Citadel, but they struggle... There's things that go on outside the Citadel that are f***ed up.
So the Citadel is all booby-trapped, but I started to wonder, because it was built by the Galactic Republic, but as soon as the Clone Wars started, the location of Lola Sayu was basically in Separatist territory. So the Separatists took the planet pretty early during the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. They didn't say how, basically. They just said they overwhelmed the...
Dooku knew about it, probably.
Probably, because he was a Jedi, so he
Yeah.
must have known of the Citadel. So they took over that planet really early, and they said that they made alterations to the Citadel. So because the Jedi only have what's in their archives, which is like the tunnels and shit that's underneath, but they're saying that data is not so accurate anymore. So they don't explicitly say that it's the Separatists that change it, but that's the question I have. Are the horrific booby traps that are everywhere, were those installed by the Separatists, or were they there when the Jedi built the Citadel?
I don't know, but it's nefarious as and I want to... This has Mace Windu written all over it. I feel like... I don't know why.
Kiadi Mundi.
Yeah. You know, I can just see Mace, like, taking some sort of personal, like, glee out of this place. I'm surprised they didn't send him as part of the incoming party that infiltrated, you know?
Yeah. What do you mean in the sense of, like, he would find it justified to put Jedi there, or that he would enjoy trying to overcome all the booby traps?
No, he would feel great and be, like, making the place a thing because he would feel justified that somebody needed to be there. He's the type of dude that would feel like, if you're dark enough, we got to put you somewhere.
Yeah. Which is interesting because he's one of those Jedi who kind of like barely walks that line.
I know. Takes one to know one.
Yeah.
He just hated so many people. Or had a bug up his about so many individuals, I'll say. He just was never happy. I never saw him smile, not once. Anyway.
He seems very bitter, yeah.
Yeah,
He's
like
a
something
bitter
happened there. So my favorite part of this whole, well, I have a lot of favorite parts. Who am I kidding? But it starts with the carbonite that we see for the first time prior to Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
And I love this scene. I remember the first time I ever watched this episode, and I was like, shut up. They're not. They're totally not. They are. Oh my God, they're doing it. And even Dave Filoni himself, in like the director's cut, says that he made it in such a way that Anakin already seems to know something about freezing people in carbonite and that it will work, and like he's totally okay with trusting the system.
In Empire Strikes Back he knows this?
No,
or he
in
knows
Clone
it
Wars.
already? Oh, okay.
Because it's never really explained why they show up and this is a thing, and Anakin's like, it's fine, we'll be totally fine, this totally works. And like,
what's he been doing?
Exactly. And so Filoni himself said, like, they kind of made it seem that Anakin already had some sort of knowledge of this process working in this sense.
Interesting.
And then he also said that they purposely put in an Ugnaught to do the carbonation process from the outside, which is what they do in Empire Strikes Back. And Filoni said that Ugnaughts are the best carbonizing
they seem
in
to
the
be like
galaxy.
Specifically talented at this for some reason.
So I kind of love that little nod.
But why do the Jedi have a carbon, like that large of a carbon freezing facility in the temple? They're in the temple. I checked.
I know.
Because they show the temple before then they go into the next scene. You know how they set the stage of where the next scene takes place. Why do they have that? What is it used for other than freezing people? That's the only thing we've ever seen it used for.
I don't know. Like, I almost think that they could transport criminals or like, but they have a jail there, don't they?
They do.
Or
they
is
have
it somewhere in Coruscant?
They do have detention cells in the Jedi Temple. Yeah. But then there's a prison on Coruscant also. So yeah, there's both. I don't know if the cells at the Jedi Temple are for external criminals or if they're only for Force sensitives. I can't remember.
It just seems like it would be like what are you doing down there, Anakin? What is happening?
I know, it's like everyone else is asleep in the temple and he just randomly wants to try freezing different things.
He'll throw a banana down and freeze it and see what happens. Like
you with your science experiment with the liquid nitrogen.
Yes. So I can't blame him too much. I had a moment myself freezing something just to see what would happen.
Yeah.
It was a non-sentient item.
Yes.
A banana,
Thank
a balloon.
God.
A balloon is really interesting. If you put it in liquid nitrogen, it shrinks. You take it out, it expands again, but it doesn't break. It's very cool.
How weird.
I know, it's really cool. So I can picture Anakin down there just throwing things in the thing and seeing what happens. Anyway, the look on his face in the animation itself when they zoom in on him is so self-confident and like...
Yes.
Self-assured, and it's really, really sexy, but it's also unnerving because we know what happens in Empire Strikes Back. What the
Yeah, it's like setting the stage for this guy to be a creep.
Totally.
Yeah. Everyone looks really good in this episode.
This whole season is when they're at their peak, whatever. But I'll never forget when they're actually climbing up the wall of the Citadel and like Obi-Wan has the piece of hair fluttering, which I love. Yeah. That's my other favorite scene. There's no nostrils. Didn't you point out to me that there's no nostrils?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes in the animation, yeah. He has just a flat nose.
Yeah. Which I love.
Which I guess, I guess nostrils aren't exactly the most attractive part of a human body, but it's kind of on everybody, so
it is, yeah,
why not?
It's a thing.
That's really funny. Okay, so they carbon freeze to bypass... They carbon freeze all of the Jedi that are going and all the clones that are going, so they can bypass a scan, right? They're going to scan the ship.
Yeah, the bioscan.
Yes, and see if there's any living beings on board. They get through the blockade scan and arrive in this insane planet, which is purple and yellow.
Yes. And
I did some research on those colors, specifically in cinematography.
Okay, what have you found? I love this part of our breakdown.
Okay, so in cinematography, you use colors to set mood, but it can also have like a subconscious meaning, and then it can have a very deliberate meaning as well. And there's different parts of using color and light. So there's difference in like hue, saturation, brightness and value, like how dark or saturated is the color. And then it's meaningful because of the color wheel, right? You know the color wheel where it has like the primary colors, and then the secondary colors are combinations of primary colors. And yellow and purple are complementary colors. They are opposite of each other on the color wheel. Okay. When you combine them together, you get brown, which is what the rest of the planet looks like.
Very much.
So this color palette is kind of interesting because both purple and yellow can have multiple meanings. So yellow is considered the most luminous color on the color wheel, and it draws the viewer's attention, which is why yellow is used for caution signs. Mm-hmm. Because biologically, we're designed to see the color yellow first, and it is very difficult for us to register the color purple. So it's interesting that they're like used together in this planet. So yellow could mean, in film, yellow is the color of wisdom and knowledge, but it's also the color of sickness, insecurity, obsession, idolization, naivety, cowardice, deceit, and hazard.
Well, that describes Tarkin right there, which, amazingly, that there's in the Citadel. Sorry.
No, you're right, though. So purple is a rarity, right? Like it's rare in nature, so it's harder for our brains to register. But purple in cinematography, well, before I say that, purple is also a symbol of royalty. Because it's so rare, only royalty could afford to wear purple dyes. Yeah. So in cinematography, purple represents fantasy, the ethereal, the illusion. It also represents eroticism, mysticism, mystery, nobility, and royalty. So it's this weird mix of colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel, but then the colors themselves have opposite meanings as well, which I started to think about, like, what would this mean? I might be reading way too much into it, but, like, it used to be the Galactic Republic, Jedi, and now it's separatists, and it's a place to hold Jedi who were once good, who are now bad, and, like, the weird mismatched duality of everything. I just thought it's obviously a deliberate choice to use these colors. Maybe they just thought it looked nice, but
no, I don't think so. I think a lot of this is very deliberate.
Well, if you think about the planet itself, the crust, when you see it from far away, it's purple. So it's like ethereal and mystical and royal. And underneath is this cracked, molten yellow core that's like sick, and it's a warning, and it's putrid. You know, it's just an interesting combination there.
It really that's a huge symbol for the galactic war that's happening, the Clone War.
Yes, exactly.
It's a symbol for, like, Palpatine himself.
Right.
It's a symbol for the Jedi and what they stand for versus what they end up doing.
Yeah.
It could be a symbol for all kinds. I love this. I love this stuff so much. And ironically, purple and yellow are my favorite colors for no reason. They just have always, I mean, it's not like a sports team or like a, you know, there's no reason behind it. I just like those colors, not necessarily together, but I like those colors. I don't like it in this sense, though.
Well, it just looks cool. It looks like a neon, like, I don't know, cyberpunk type thing. But the planet is, you know, like we talked about, the landscape is like horns sticking out of the ground and crazy, like, outcroppings. And the Citadel itself is built on a butte, I think is what they said, between two lava lakes.
Well, yeah, because when they leave and they get out of this thing, there's lava rivers everywhere.
And there's a lava or a magma sea or something like that on the planet.
Good Lord.
It's crazy shit,
All
dude.
rivers end up to the sea. So I suppose if it's
true.
a lava river, it does end up at a lava ocean.
God, that sounds terrifying.
Sounds like a great place to put a citadel.
Yeah, perfect for a prison.
God. Well, the reason they're going there is because the Jedi Evan Peel.
Yeah.
What a strange name. It's like Even Keel, but it's Evan Peel. And it's so pedestrian. Evan is so pedestrian.
Todd.
Yeah. George Peel is just hanging out in the... But he, like... So he's such a tiny little thing. And they just have him in this... In this... They're keeping him... They're held there. And they go to save him. And I just feel bad for the dude because what ends up happening anyway is like such a useless trip. Another useless trip brought to you by the Jedi.
Yeah, it explains why he's not in other parts of the stories, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But do you know how he lost his eye?
I don't. Do you?
I don't, but I want to, like, find out really quick. They might not talk about it in canon. It might just be like a legend story, but
well, it makes him seem so bad compared to his stature.
I know he's a hard dude. He's a great character.
His ears, they like flap.
I know, he's kind of like, his ears have always reminded me of Yoda, honestly.
Yeah,
but
he blings them out. He has like rings and shit on him, doesn't he?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe in the cartoon. He doesn't in the movies. But,
okay.
He's being tortured by a medical droid, I noticed.
Okay, yeah. So that had to be an enhancement brought to you by the Separatists. Well, the guy who runs the Citadel, what's his name?
Osi Sopek.
Thank you. He's deranged. And I kind of love it. He treats it like a little mouse trap.
Yes.
Like the old game from the 80s and 90s, if anyone recalls. It's like, you know, you have to...
It almost never worked.
Well, this doesn't work either when you bring Anakin, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Rex, who else? Echo is here. This is where
know.
I mean, it's not this episode, but Echo, we lose Echo.
Coming up. Yes.
Yeah. And so,
no.
like, there's shit that goes down in this arc. We meet Tarkin before we meet Tarkin.
Right. It's a huge deal. I know.
And he's such a whiny bitch in this episode. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I love that Tarkin immediately, he and Obi-Wan hate each other.
Obi-Wan is just like, listen here, bitch. Like, he gets sassy with them. He does not take...
He rolls his eyes.
He doesn't take any of it. Like, look, we're just here to rescue you people. No thanks necessary. Let's move. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're skipping the best part of the episode.
Which is
when Obi-Wan, like, goes ham in the hallway.
Yes.
Oh! Oh, it's so good.
It's so good. He very rarely goes that crazy, but he does it a few times in this arc, and it's delightful. Like, backspin, backward stabbing. Yeah,
what does
great.
he say? They're electrified, or magnetized. They're magnetized. And then
yes.
Once that happened, okay, poor Anakin, okay?
He's
This poor
busy.
dude. He's hanging by his beautiful, sexy, bionic arm up on the ceiling, getting shocked as hell, unable to help.
Oh, getting electrocuted as usual.
But he has enough strength and resolve to, like, get his weapon out and use it and,
It's amazing.
disengage. But Obi-Wan is really, his lightsaber work in the hallway is really outstanding to watch.
It's so cool. Yeah, and they did some neat like shots on him in that sequence where he says they're magnetized and he's trying to use the force to push them back. They like zoom in on his face and give you that kind of energy. It was moving like against his energy. It was really cool. I like that whole sequence because all of the Jedi are being badasses, but the Citadel's booby traps are really getting the better of them over and over. And there's a story I heard of how Filoni asked James Arnold Taylor when he's voicing Obi-Wan, because he voices Obi-Wan, Plo Koon, and Osi Sopek in this episode. He is busy.
Right, yeah.
I can't believe he voices Sopek also. It's insane. Filoni asked him to find a balance of sounding compassionate, but still knowing that the mission needed to be moved forward. And I think he did a really good job of that because, you know, the clones, when the walls get electrified and it's like coming up the hallway towards them and one of the clones gets killed, it's so horrible. And there's a lot of like anonymous henchman, you know, anonymous clone getting killed in this episode because there's such terrible booby traps everywhere.
Yeah, it's really hard to watch the clones fall throughout these 3 episodes.
Yeah.
You know,
The one who falls off when they're climbing the
wall.
outside and he falls into one of the mines. That was horrible.
and we haven't mentioned Ahsoka, who snuck in on this.
Right. So I have some weird feelings about that because she like straight up lies.
Oh, 100%. But it works out.
Yeah, but still, like, that's not very Jedi to just like bold-faced lie, bald-faced lie, whatever the phrase is, to like just make up that Plo Koon told her to join the mission. And then I won't jump ahead to the last episode, but still, like...
Yeah, the final conversation is questionable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, she pulls a fast one. You know, let's assume that the cryogenic freezing didn't turn out right. They would have one extra like casualty that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they all make it. They show up there. Oh, look, Ahsoka. What are you doing here, Ahsoka? And turns out that she's really, really necessary on this trip.
Right.
And saves the one or two times where none of the others could do what she does. Like going through the little shaft crawling through because she was small.
Yeah. When you can see the entire arc, she's working extra hard to prove herself.
Yes.
And she's
Guilt?
taking it in stride. Yeah.
Is it
but
guilt,
she's
because she snuck in?
That's a good question. I think she's trying to prove to Anakin that she can handle the risk.
Oh, 100%.
And I want to know what your thoughts are on this. I don't feel 100% certain what tone they're trying to take there. Because at the beginning, Anakin says to Ahsoka, you do or die on this mission, and that's not a risk I'm willing to share with you. Why is this mission any more do or die than any other one that they've been on? Is it because they've just been to the Citadel where she did actually die? I'm sorry, the Citadel. They've just been to Mortis where she did actually die? Or
I think so.
is he being overly protective? And then is she...
100%.
But also, like, she's not taking orders, right? Like,
No.
he is her teacher, her master, and she's just straight up telling him, you don't get to decide things for me.
Yeah.
And I can't get a sense of who's right.
Maybe that's the point.
Yeah, like the episode doesn't take a side necessarily. I don't know. I just thought it raises all these questions, but doesn't answer them. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Compared to what happened on Mortis, I would say that was Ahsoka's trial and she passed. Now, knowing Anakin's deep-seated fear of loss, I could see him being like, oh no, not again, and not in succession. Are you going to come and almost get killed again? Like, maybe he needs a period of... But we don't know how much time passed between Mortis and this arc, like, technically in the timeline. But it probably would take Anakin longer than the average master to let their Padawan back into like an overprotective parent. You're not going to let them just go do the same thing after you still feeling maybe somewhat responsible. Because a lot of that was on Anakin's shoulders in Mortis.
Yeah.
So he's probably carrying that around because that's what Anakin does best. He just keeps it, holds it, carries it, overdoes it. And, but at the same time, she's becoming more independent and more sure of herself. And maybe he doesn't want to lose the master part, similar to like how Qui-Gon just kind of, I don't want to say ditched Obi-Wan, but once you come into yourself, you don't need a master anymore. And maybe Anakin wanted to be needed in that respect and wanted to be like, no, you can't go because I still have say here. You know, maybe that's a stretch, but
I think it's an interesting point, honestly.
he loves her. That's his kid sister. And like, as soon as the kid sister doesn't need her big brother anymore, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah, that's a hard adaptation. And honestly, that's hard for even parents whose kids go to college. You know, it's hard to adjust to not being needed because you are needed by your kids. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they don't want to need you anymore. Yeah, that would be a really hard adjustment. We all know Anakin is no good at adjusting to anything.
No, and he really, really likes being needed. So, because he really needs everyone. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's always sad with those two because obviously Ahsoka is very capable of herself. She proves it over and over. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think it was left ambiguous. I guess to answer your question, I don't know if there is a right answer.
Yeah. It's interesting because they usually take a side. And I don't really feel like, at least in this episode, I don't feel like there's a side. Maybe by the end of the arc, we'll feel it more, but...
Doesn't she also play a little, not devil's advocate, but almost? Because Tarkin, she doesn't like Tarkin. And she hears him yapping in Anakin's ear, right? And she's watching this. And she's coming from a more unbiased perspective. She's just like, what the is going on with these two, you know?
Yeah.
She's always watching and trying to figure out what is going on with Anakin. You know, between... like Kenobi when he had the lightsaber up to the dude's neck in the ship, she was like, what the f***? And then why is he so angry about the slaves and stuff? And then in Mortis, you know, just when he had to choose technically between Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, but he saved both and all this stuff. I just feel like this is piling up in Ahsoka's brain. And she's watching Anakin literally transform into something unrecognizable or slowly unrecognizable to her.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know where she stands with doubts on the Jedi at this point, right?
No, well, I mean, by Cadavo, which is later, she's still encouraging the governor to join the Republic at the very least, and she doesn't seem to have doubts about the Jedi until the Jedi doubt her, I think.
Yeah.
I think she might have more doubts about Anakin and seeing the inconsistency maybe between his teachings and what the Jedi say is appropriate. But speaking of that, like Obi-Wan even says to her, I see you're taking the do as I say, not as I do approach.
Yes.
It's like, that's just hold that mirror up to yourself, Master Kenobi.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like all three of them are classics. Do as I say, not as I do.
well, you know, it ends up working out in some instances. But it takes all of them. The real hero of the Citadel episode and arc is R2-D2.
Yes, pretty much, yeah. They'd all be screwed without him.
As usual. He's there to facilitate the disasters and keep them all together. Like, just keep it together. Because he's the one that flies the ship in with a makeshift Raja droid.
Right, yeah, he's got 3 battle droids. Also, why the was 3PO in this episode at all? Except
I'm not
for
sure. I don't
fan
know.
service? Because he's Padme's droid at this point. Why is he at the Jedi Temple randomly with R2-D2?
I don't know.
Sorry, I just get annoyed when he shows up.
I know you do. I know you do. Well, maybe he was running errands or something. He just stopped by to see R2, just to say hi.
Just to check out the carbon freezing facility.
Or that, yeah, you never know. Well, it's funny. Maybe he had to be there because he's there in Empire Strikes Back, in a sense.
Yeah, I guess. He has to understand.
The whole gang's here. I don't know. R2 is the real MVP in Star Wars, period.
Truly. The whole weight of the story is on his back. Well, I will say, though, that Obi-Wan has some very sexy moments in the whole thing.
The hair.
The hair. He does a pull-up, which is great.
Yes. Oh, when he peeks up over that little ledge.
Yes, exactly.
When we don't get the nostrils. It's so great, right. Though. Like, that takes some upper body strength, and you and I have commented on it before.
It's true. He's got to be strong to do it. Or weigh as much as a piece of paper. But
no, he's got the Dorito shape. The shoulders down to the waist ratio.
And if you're not sure how big he is, look at Revenge. And there's a scene where Ventress tries to roll him over, and he looks huge compared to her.
Yeah, I love that.
It's really interesting to see that, because he always doesn't look that big because he's next to Anakin. And then when he's next to Ventress, he looks huge.
Well, then can you imagine how big Anakin is? I can.
I'm sure you can. Well, I also love the moment where Obi-Wan does the Die Hard run, where he they set all the explosives off and he runs down the hall with the bombs going up behind him.
Yes.
Oh man.
Yes. Yeah. I just love how every time that they're in the Citadel and they bypass or defeat one of the booby traps or the guy, what's his name, is sitting there like, ooh, let's press this button and see what happens. And then they totally defeat whatever that is. He gets increasingly more and more irate.
Yes.
And he kind of gets mad professor-y. Drast, they beat me, let's try this. And then he codes something up I don't know, he's living there alone by himself with a bunch of droids. Probably dreaming up ways to carry out things.
Yeah, that's all he does all day long. He's described on Wikipedia as sadistic, so...
Yep, yes, 100%.
Clearly, he's got some issues. I mean, the fact that he's a combination of Al Pacino and Christopher Walken is...
No, it's perfect!
Makes it even funnier.
It's so perfect. If Christopher Walken worked in the Citadel, I would go and hang out there. Who wouldn't?
Oh my god. It must be really funny to be James Arnold Taylor doing both those parts because they talk to each other. And
Yes.
from what they say, I've seen a bunch of interviews, the characters, like the actors don't do one character and then do a new take as the other. They just switch back and forth while they're
that
recording.
would be really hard. Well, ask D. Bradley Baker how that works.
Seriously. Yeah, he played the torture droid in this episode and all the clones. And Ashley was the tactical droid. She was the tactical droid in this episode. She was the
tactical droid?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I love how they do that. They'll just have the actors do some secondary voices for the episode.
If they're there, why not? That's cool.
The first time I watched it, it never registered to me. And then I started researching and I was like, what? They did those voices too?
Yeah, that's always my reaction. I'm just always and forever impressed by voice actors. I mean,
yeah.
So this episode is it sets the stage for the nonsense and craziness that ends up happening in the next two.
Yes.
Which we will cover.
There's more Tarkin.
There's way more Tarkin. He can go f*** himself. But this is one of our favorite episodes that you and I used to watch together and rewind, play,
Yep.
rewind one more time, play that scene over again. You know, good
Freeze
times.
the interface, have to close it out, relaunch it, send the link to each other again.
I regret nothing.
Same.
All right, our audience question this week to you is, did you expect to see good old Tarkin show up in the Citadel episode? Because I sure didn't.
No, it totally took me by surprise when I first saw the episode. It was quite a shock.
Yeah, but I loved it.
I did too. The guy voices him very well.
Very well.
Join us back here next week. We're going to dive into the second episode of this arc. The episode is called Counterattack. There's more shenanigans, more torture, more Tarkin.
More Tarkin.
It's going to be a delightful show. She'll come... I can't say it. A delightful show. A delightful show. So come on back and join us next week.
All right, last week, we talked about all kinds of stuff. We started with our celebration announcement. We ended with Matt Lanter stuff. And a lot of laughs were had. And this week's comment comes from my mother, Gina.
Hi, Gina.
Also a patron. She personally told me she loves the idea. Well, first of all, she congratulated us again on making our way to London. But she said it's a fantastic idea to have the merchandise with the QR code. She said, now that I know what one is, I would use it. And she also gave me very pointed advice that I need to behave and don't strain my voice if I'm going to do this panel.
That's true. You can't strain your voice just because you want to enjoy yourself, but most importantly, because you're a panelist, you have to be able to talk.
And she said, now you stop that, Leanne. You stop yourself. You behave. And don't do that. And I said, okay. So there's our comment from the week. Some motherly advice on...
Thank you, Gina.
on our trip to London. So thanks, Mom.
We love you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Most Things Kenobi podcast. We appreciate every single one of our patrons and are grateful for your support. If you'd like to support the podcast and become a patron as well, head on over to the Most Things Kenobi Patreon. As always, you can follow us on Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. If you enjoy our podcast, feel free to rate us on Spotify and Apple. And if you need just one place to find all of these, head over to mostthingskenobi.com.
So until next time, my space twin, may the Force be with you.
Always.